So if you guys remember those power versus force videos, right? The scale of consciousness. So I went through one right here, and the second right here. All I did in those videos was tell you what the scale of consciousness was and like the emotions that were associated with it. I never actually went over the difference between power and force. So you guessed it, that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. So power always arises from meaning, motive, and principle. For this example, we're going to be using the Declaration of Independence, right? That document is obviously full of meaning and principle. It has no need for justification. It stands on its own. Power always supports the significance of life itself. If we're going back to the scale of consciousness, this would kind of refer to Gandhi, for example. He calibrated at the level of 700. He is deep in power, and the principles that he stands for stand for life itself. It supports life itself. Power also appeals to nobility. It's uplifting, it's enabling, it's empowering. Just as the Declaration of Independence was, just as Gandhi was. The thing about force is it always needs to be justified. And if you're an American, let's take the Battle of Wounded Knee. So basically that was when we went onto reservations and effectively kicked them off their land. And we need to justify this, right? Or, putting, Japanese people in internment camps. That's force. It always needs to be justified. There always needs to be a rationalization, a reason. It always has to have some sort of explanation along with it. The action can never stand on its own. So in this sense, force is always partial because it can never stand on its own. It always needs something else to complement it so it can so people can rationalize it. Whereas power is whole. Gandhi can stand on his own. The Declaration of Independence needs no justification. It needs no explanation. The documentation stands on its own. Force, by the very definition, is movement, meaning it is going against a counterforce. Force goes from here to there against opposition. Take the example of driving. You're driving, right? And then you slam your brakes because now your force is going this way and the brakes are going to stop. So your body is still emulating that force. That's why we have seatbelts, because the seatbelt acts as the counterforce. Or another example, we can take someone arguing with you. They are forcing their viewpoint on you, their opinion. They need your counterforce, i.e. you arguing back, you trying to disagree with them to result in an argument. That's what they want. They need counterforce. An argument can't stand on its own. It needs someone else to play devil's advocate, or else the argument will just not happen because the force is partial. Power, on the other hand, stays whole. It does not need any other counterforce or anything else. Power is within itself. Force is always incomplete and it always must be fed energy, exactly what I'm saying. Power, on the other hand, is whole. It needs nothing outside of itself and it also makes no demands. Force always consumes, power always gives forth. Power is a source of providing life energy, and force is the source that consumes life energy. Power, in essence, is compassion. It breeds a positive self-image. Force is judgmental, therefore it breeds a negative self-image. Take, for example, when you see a homeless person on the street, and your first thought is a negative judgment. That's force. You are forcing a judgment, right? Whereas power is compassion. You go up to that homeless person and you talk to them, ask how they're doing, and maybe even give them money and food. In that instance, you are supporting life itself. You're supporting nobility and virtue. That's power. Force always needs justification. That action of judging the homeless person cannot stand on its own because it's forceful. It needs justification. Force always wants to polarize. If you notice in all the examples, there has to be another side. It is not seeking to unify. It wants to polarize and paint it wants to paint the world in sort of like a win-loss dichotomy, right? The problem with this scenario is polarization always creates conflict. And if you're always living in a win-loss dichotomy, that means there's always a winner and always a loser. If this is how you constantly paint your reality, you cannot help but create a lot of enemies. See, the thing about power is it transcends this need of duality and dichotomy. Power needs no proof to stand on its own. Power is not trying to manipulate. Power stands still just as it is. Like I'm saying, power is associated with supporting life itself. It is a life energy. That means you choose health over disease, life over death, honor over dishonor, faith over cynicism, trust over doubt, and being constructive over destructive. I hope this video helped you guys understand the differences between power and force, and maybe allow you to employ some self-awareness when you feel like you're acting in forceful principles and forceful school of thoughts and not acting within power. Remember, power always stays still. It does not need any argumentation, any justification. There's no duality. There's no two sides. It doesn't have to be polarized. There's no win-loss. Power simply is. And it supports life and it stands for truth. Think of Gandhi, Abraham Lincoln, the Declaration of Independence. All of these people and documents stand for power itself. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys feel like you reside in power or force? And if you reside in force, what do you think you can do to reside in power? I'm out. Peace.